In this episode, we are chatting with Matthias Giraud, who's also known as Super Frenchie. He's one of the last remaining professional ski base jumpers in the world, which is a sport that combines three of the most dangerous disciplines: mountaineering, big mountain skiing, and base jumping.
My occupation is more than an occupation, it's a vocation. It's something that I chose to dedicate my life to from an early age.
He's been mentored by legends like McConkey, Eric Roner, and JT Holmes.
So Shane was the first base jumper I met, and he was so friendly, so cool. We talked like at least 30 minutes. He gave me all the steps.
From his breakthrough moment for being the first person to ski base jump Mount Hood in 2008, to capturing GoPro's first ever major viral video by escaping an avalanche in 2012, and achieving the highest ski base jump in the world by ski basing Mount Blanc in 2019, Matthias has worked with major brands and networks to bring this niche sport to millions of viewers worldwide.
The last thing I know, the next day I'm on Good Morning America, CNN. That's 2008. So exactly pretty much 4 years almost after I moved to the US. And last thing I know, I'm on national TV on my first ski base jump.
His story of pushing human potential has even earned him standing ovations at prestigious venues like TEDx Berkeley.
Let's have the courage to honor our passions, be there for the people we love, and always, always stick our landing. Thank you very much for your attention.
But in 2013, Matthias nearly lost everything when a ski base jump did not go according to plan, all just weeks before the birth of his son.
I hit the wall 4 times, it broke my femur, I managed to turn around, passed out under my parachute from the pain, I flew 4,000 feet unconscious, fell another 50 feet onto dirt, 3 days in a coma, and also 3 weeks before the birth of my kid.
So in today's interview, we are going to be exploring Matthias' story, learning how he got into ski base jumping, finding out why he pursues such a dangerous activity, and how did he rebuild himself after such a serious accident, both physically and mentally.
I thoroughly went back to ground zero and really rebuilt myself as an athlete and a base jumper to have a solid approach. I had to establish a new frame of execution in order to increase my chances of survival.
Welcome to The Edge Report. Matthias, I'm excited to dive into your story. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and you? How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So, what was your childhood like? Were you someone who always grew up wanting to be a skier and base jumper? Did you grow up near the mountains in France?
So I was not meant to be a mountain kid. I was a tourist at first. My parents had a vacation home in the Alps. I was very fortunate to spend every holiday in the mountain skiing. Then my family moved to south of France. So I joined an urban ski team that would take kids from cities. They had like a little ski team that would take us on races in the Pyrenees or the Alps. So every weekend I would go race. For me, racing was the thing, because racing was the cool thing at the time. They were starting to get some free skiing competitions or extreme competitions, but it was before the new school freestyle movement. That's the only option there was at the time. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a badass ski racer. My mother just on a whim just pulled me out of ski academy. She's like, "Oh, you're thinking too much about skiing. I'm worried about the future. You're coming back to south of France." And she locked me in a private Catholic high school with bars on the windows in boarding school. And I was like, oh my God, what do you just crushed my dreams. Like, so I rebelled and I just tanked every single subject in school on purpose except PE, because we had rock climbing and a lot of endurance stuff. I was pretty much being like, yo, I'm made to be an athlete. Screw you. I'm not gonna abide by your rules.
Like, how old were you during this time when she locked you away?
I was 15, so, and, but I wasn't fighting directly with my parents because I knew it was a lost cause. I would just smile and, do my thing. But then I would just sabotage myself in school. And then I met like a really cool, like a student advisor who was like, "Matthias, I know exactly what you're doing. I know you're dreaming about skiing. You're making a statement, but you're hurting yourself right now because the school system in France is so rigid. It's like you're gonna be held back, and that's gonna prevent you from actually doing what you want." He was like, "Get high school done and over with. we're going to convince your parents to put you in a public high school where you have more freedom and do whatever you want. Just get high school out of the way, go to college, and then figure out a way to get into skiing. So I was like, okay, it seemed like a sound advice, right? You know, went to business school in Lyon, got accepted in a really good business school. But then one of my sisters committed suicide. So there was a big like clashing thing of seeing her alive at a happy event and then seeing her, because she threw herself out of a window. So her body was pretty damaged when I saw her body last, you know. So I had, for about 10 years, I had flashbacks of her before and after. She tried, you know, commit suicide a few times, and I had such a thirst for life. I did not understand her despair. We never really connected, and then the last time then I saw her after that was to recognize her body at the mortuary.
Wow. Like, how did your sister's suicide affect you? Was it, were you guys close? Did it leave a lasting impact on you?
So it was hard. As I was, you know, I wasn't very close to my sister actually, because I think we were so different. She was 9 years older than me, so I think there's also a clash of age, you know. I was definitely sad for a while that I didn't get to know her more, but at the same time, as you learn to accept and digest this, you learn to be pragmatic about it and be like, well, we were both blood related, but we were in different planets in many ways. You know, she didn't realize her dreams. She didn't have dreams to realize because she didn't have anything that was worth living for beyond her pain, her suffering. But I had all this, and I'm like, it's almost like I could feel the clock ticking. I was, you know, 18 years old, 19 years old, and I was like, okay, I got to make my life happen. And then all of a sudden I had the opportunity to transfer to a school in Colorado, in the mountains, while studying business. I wasn't aspiring to be a pro skier, but I wanted to be in the ski world no matter what. So I was like studying business in Colorado and skiing powder every day, and I could work at the ski resort in sales and marketing. I'm like, I'm doing this.
I know school can be quite expensive here in the US compared to Europe. So how did you end up affording to make that transition? Did your parents help you out? Did you have any sort of grants or anything like that? Special scholarships for this?
I was able to somehow buy an apartment when I was 18, going to business school with my sister who passed. So when she was still living, we bought an apartment together in Lyon. It was a tiny apartment. The thing was 270 square feet. So, and that was everything, you know, so bathroom, kitchen, like it was like a box, you know, and I was able to sell it. And because my sister passed and I got her share also of the apartment, which I split her share with my sisters. You know, I gave, you know, a third of her share to my older sister, a third to my other sister, and then I kept a third of her share. So I had half plus a third of the other half. I pretty much walked with just enough money to pay for school in the US with this and be debt free. So that's how I made it happen. But when I moved to the US, I had just enough money for school. I didn't have money for skiing anymore, you know. So luckily I had a couple pairs of skis. I worked at the ski area, but it was because as a student visa I couldn't get paid, so it was volunteer work in sales and marketing to get experience. While doing this though, the only way I could really keep skiing was to get sponsored. And so I started doing photo shoots with the ski resorts, and then I started getting pictures in magazines, and you know, whenever they had a big powder dump, I'd go and shoot with them and have a segment on Weather Channel. So last thing I knew, I have like national TV stuff, and I had a full page in Ski Magazine doing a backflip off a cliff, you know, and then other photographers saw my pictures, so then they called me to go film with them. And then Sven Brunso was a local pro skier who was also the director of sales and marketing at the ski resort. He told me kind of how to contact brands, how to position myself, and then last thing I know, within 3 months, I was sponsored head to toes. And I was like, what the hell? This is, I guess I'm living the American dream. I just moved here. I'm going to school. I'm, you know, doing well in school, skiing. And now I just accomplished my dream of just being a sponsored skier. And right there, it got me thinking. I'm like, well, if I could get sponsored, maybe I could make a living out of this thing too. So let's work towards this.
At that time, when you're going to school in the US, did people start referring to you as Super Frenchie, or how did that nickname come about? Because I know you've been going by it for quite a while. What's the origin story of Super Frenchie?
So I didn't come up with the name Super Frenchie. It was given to me 3 weeks after I moved to Durango. there was a bigger competition, and I made some friends, and my buddy Sean is like, hey man, there's a bigger competition. I know you don't do a lot of park, like, I could do some tricks, but he's like, you should join the comp, just have fun. I was like, all right, sounds good, So I entered the bigger competition, do a few jumps, do a few flips, things like that. So I'm going back up for one of my other runs, and there was like a French student that was just doing an exchange program with Fort Lewis College, the school where I went to, and he had made a French flag, and he tied it around my neck, and all of a sudden I look, and I'm like, man, this looks like a cape. I was like, I got to do a Superman front flip. I have a cape. So I just dropped in and I did a big fat Superman front flip over the crowd, stomped my landing. Everybody cheered and screamed. They thought it was so funny and cool or whatever. And then I went back up for another run and I had my cape flapping behind me as I'm going back up with the snowmobile. And then I'm about to drop in again. And then the announcer, he goes, and here comes number 73, Super Frenchie. Everybody screamed. I went and did another Superman front flip, stomped it, and then from there on, the name stuck, Super Frenchie. So,
What did you think of the name? Did you like the name Super Frenchie? And then did like other people like it? Like, what was your feelings about it?
I think it was funny. I liked it. I thought it was cool. I started introducing myself as Super Frenchie. Actually, a family friend was just like, oh, don't call yourself Super Frenchie. It's childish and immature. And I was just like, huh, okay. And then little did I know it became my trademark and I made a living of this.
That's super funny and rad. So where did the inspiration for base jumping and ski base jumping come from then? Because it sounds like at this point you were just mostly into skiing.
I don't know. So I saw my first base jumping and ski base jumping images in a French movie from the 90s called Pushing the Limits. And I knew that I was going to do that, right? And driving to the ski area on one of the first clear days, I could see this huge mountain at the end of the highway called Engineer Mountain. And I don't know why, probably because it was the first big mountain that I saw in Colorado. I was like, I want to ski this. And the guys were like, well, first of all, you can't ski this thing until April because the avalanche danger is super high here. The San Juan Mountains have the highest avalanche danger in the world. So you can't ski any steep face or big mountains until the snow is stable, which is generally in the spring. And the cliff at the end is like 300 feet. You would die. I was like, well, I put a parachute on my back. I just ski this, jump off, open a parachute. I've always wanted to base jump. Then I'd fly away. And I saw ski base jumping back in the day, but I didn't see the free ride version of it. And I started talking about that, but I started becoming obsessed with this mountain, and the word got around town that I wanted to do that. And a kid heard about me and he had a matchstick movie with Shane McConkey in there, but I didn't know who Shane was. And he was like, hey, come check this out. And then he played Shane's segment and he was focused. And his opening segment is, you have Flesh into Gear from CKY that is like blaring, and then he goes down and jumps and does his front flip off this 600-foot cliff after skiing a full powder freeride line and perfect opening and flies away with his parachute. He's like, oh my God, this guy does what I want to do and the technology works. It completely makes sense. And so from there, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this.
So how did you actually go from wanting to get into base jumping to actually becoming a base jumper? Was there a course or did you have a mentor that took you under their wing and taught you the ropes? What was the learning process like and how did you do that?
A kid I was competing with in Extreme Comp, and we had a couple sponsors together. Jesse Hall, who's on the GoPro Bomb Squad. Jesse had started base jumping and he had a bunch of jumps at the time, and he was like, I'll teach you how to jump. And so then I started skydiving, got a bunch of jumps, and did some round trips back and forth between New Mexico and Durango. I only had like 40 some skydives and had a base rig, and Jesse was like, oh, you're good enough, I'll take you to the bridge. And then he took me to the bridge in Idaho, and I got 9 base jumps in the first day. Did a fat gainer on the last jump because I was doing so many flips on skis. It came very naturally, that air sense from skiing translated very well into base jumping.
When did you decide to combine both the base jumping and the skiing together? What was your first ski base jump and how did that go?
So at the time, I couldn't make a living just off skiing yet, and I was working for one of my sponsors as a sales rep, and my territory was the Northwest. And driving through Mount Hood, I was like, wow, it looks like there might be some cliffs big enough up there to do a ski base jump. I found a cliff on the southwest, I think, above Timberline called Mississippi Head, and it's a cliff that goes straight into Zigzag Canyon. A local told me about it, and he was like, oh, I think it could be big enough, and then went scouted it, and when I was scouted, it was like a calm day, no wind. So I was like, all right, cool, well, I was terrified, but I had a friend come up to help, and he brought a couple camera guys, and I had a skydiving helmet with a HDV camera screwed on top because it was before GoPro, and just sent it. landed perfect. And then they called the news, actually, and they put out on the news. And then I didn't really know Mount Hood had such a notoriety in the US and reputation. And it's the second most climbed mountain, I think, in the world. And last thing I know, the next day I'm on Good Morning America, CNN. That was 2008. So exactly pretty much 4 years almost after I moved to the US. And last thing I know, I'm on national TV on my first ski base jump. That was the first big exposure I got.
I'm sure your sponsors were stoked about it. Did they help you out, like buy your gear and stuff? Because you said you didn't have a lot of extra money after you moved to America and you were paying for school. And I know base jumping gear can be in the thousands of dollars. So how did you afford all that stuff?
So I was sponsored by a ski company. They were running out of business. They had a bunch of skis left that needed to sell. They were like, help us sell those at ski swaps and we'll give you keep half the money, you give us the other half. So that's what I did. I was slinging skis at ski swaps, but that was only half the money that I needed to buy my first parachute. The local brewery at the time, Ska Brewery, they're like, hey man, why don't you make t-shirts and base them on our logo and we'll help you sell them. I couldn't really get a sponsor to buy me a parachute and put the logo on it if I didn't have any experience or exposure as a base jumper. I printed 100 t-shirts and I sold them through all the bike shops, ski shops. And then the word got around town. I'd walk in town and people would be like, hey dude, that's Frenchie. Oh yeah, that's the guy who wants to jump off engineer. It's like, yeah. Oh, he's totally gonna die. He's like, yeah, I bought one of his t-shirts. Oh, I'm gonna buy one too. It was pretty funny, dude. It was really funny. And all of a sudden people are rocking my t-shirts everywhere. I sold so many, I don't even have one left. I don't have any t-shirts left. And I remember when I sent the check after buying for the parachute, I had $60 left in my bank account. So I came back a month after Mount Hood. I ski base jump off engineer. And there were like 200 or 300 people lining the road watching the jump. As I was skiing down, I could hear them screaming. Their voices were echoing all the way in the mountain. It was amazing. It was almost like a PR company had put on this event. There were like news reporters and trucks and people. And I land and they hand me a beer. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. It was just the whole town got behind it. I really felt the support. And that's what was so cool about America. It's if you have a kooky idea and you're really motivated and people are inspired by it, they will get behind you and help you. And it's got really this let's go kind of spirit, and I really, really enjoy that.
So how did you end up meeting legends like Shane McConkey, Eric Rohner, and JT Holmes? What were they like and what did they think of you base jumping? Were they stoked on it? Did they give you tips or pointers or anything like that? What was the vibe around those three?
So Shane was the first base jumper I met. We met at a trade show. Shane turns around, he's like, hey man, how are you? He's like, I'm Shane McConkey. Like, he introduced himself, I shook his hand, and he was so friendly, so cool. We talked like at least 30 minutes. I was like, oh, what you do is so cool, and I really want to base jump. And he was like, all right, well, if you really want to base jump and ski base jump, start with skydiving, do this, do that. So he gave me all the steps. Shane really mentored me. We talked for ski base jumping and the technical aspect. We talked every week for the year before his death. And then JT actually and I met more physically actually doing stuff. And we both ended up sponsored by GoPro a few years later. Did the athlete summit together and doing stunt gigs and all this stuff together. And JT did his first ski base jump after the crash with Shane with me in Chamonix. We somehow were able to be at the same place at the same time and did a ski base jump together. So we started becoming friends like that. One morning I woke up to an email from Rohner. Without even contacting him, he emailed me pointers on how to get into ski base jumping in addition to Shane. It was amazing. I realized my luck, good fortune meeting all these guys for sure.
What was your ski base progression like? Like, were you progressing pretty fast? Were you taking your time? And did anyone have any concerns for you at all doing this like new dangerous activity?
Things went very gnarly, very, very fast. I took some big bites right away. I had so much hunger and desire, and I was so confident in my skiing that it really influenced my choices as a ski base jumper. At first, it wasn't necessarily a quest of ego or ambition. It was truly a thirst for the endeavor and the sport. Shane was a little scared. I went so fast. He reached out, not to me, but to a couple of people in my circle and telling them to ask me to slow down a little bit because he was worried I was going to die. But, unfortunately, he ended up being the one dying. Fortunately, I ended up surviving, but you never know how things are going to play out. But Shane was concerned. He was like, he's definitely going really, really fast. with not a lot of experience in doing some really, really dangerous jumps. The last thing I know, I'm doing stunts for Apple with JT, and I ended up working with Jimmy Chin and Rob Bruce, who filmed the double front flip of Shane on the Eiger. I worked with all these amazing people, but then by going so quickly, I started pioneering some jumps, because these are jumps that had never been done in some of these mountains, and so by doing this first, I started tackling gnarlier and gnarlier projects, and more demanding projects where you have a 5, 6, 7 or 2-day climb with a steep skiing approach and a technical jump, and then you got to fly away, and then you got to get out of there, and you're not supported by a helicopter. Sometimes you are, but most of the time you're not. The helicopter is for the camera guys because they can't get to where you are.
I want to hear about this trilogy of mountain peaks in the Alps that you wanted to go and ski base jump. I know you had this big goal to jump these 3 prominent peaks. What happened and what was that all about?
The classic alpinism trilogy is the Eiger, the Matterhorn, and the Grand Joras, which is a very technical face on the shoulder of Mont Blanc. The Eiger was pretty much a mandatory rite of passage for me to be a big mountain ski base jumper. After the Eiger, I was like, well, what's next? I was like, well, the Matterhorn. Obviously, if you do the Eiger, you got to do the Matterhorn. And then when I looked at the Matterhorn, I'm like, man, that thing is a pile of rocks. The Matterhorn, I was blinded by my desire and ambition. So in many ways, it was perhaps a jump of ego, where I wanted it so bad that you kind of deform the reality of what things are. You're convincing yourself that it's good instead of things actually being good. After the Matterhorn, I didn't jump for a month. I was really reassessing, digesting, reflecting on my actions and my close call. And I took my time, Matterhorn was 2011. It was 4 days after we shot the avalanche. It was also a time when I was just, busting double backflips on 280-foot cliffs on the ski base and escaping avalanches, and, then going straight to the Matterhorn. And so I wasn't letting things time to mature, or I wasn't giving myself enough time to digest and recover from these experiences. And I was just kind of diving into the momentum of things. Yeah, then I had my crash 2013, had to rebuild myself, take my time. And I realized that what I was doing wrong wasn't necessarily physically. My technique was good. It was just more my mental approach and analysis of my environment that I needed to fine tune. So I went back to working on this. And then finally, I could ski base jump from the top of Mont Blanc in 2019. So it took 8 years after the Matterhorn. But yeah, so Eiger 2010, Matterhorn 2011, Mont Blanc 2019. So pretty much it was a 9-year period to make that Alps trilogy come to life and actually be completed flawlessly. So
let's talk about the big crash. It's probably one of the most gnarliest things I've ever seen captured on video. It's in your Super Frenchie documentary, and it seems like you could have easily died or seriously been disabled for the rest of your life. Can you take us back to that day and walk us through it and tell us what the recovery process was like for you?
So that jump was actually for me, I think it was a combination of things, right? As it always is in life, direct and indirect causes. But it's also, what that jump represented for me, it was a stepping stone towards ski base jumping from the summit of Mont Blanc. Mont Blanc was like my ultimate goal, right? It was my holy grail. But it's a 2-day climb with a technical descent, a very technical jump, and then you got to get out of there. And so to practice that jump on the Pointe d'Arreux was almost a perfect practice, because it's half the climb. It was a 5 to 6 hour climb that day with steep skiing, jumping, and it's half the altitude pretty much of Mont Blanc. So it's like, wow, it checks off a lot of boxes. So in my mind, I had set it up as the mandatory step towards ski base jumping from Mont Blanc. So that's why I did this thing.
So this jump that almost killed you was actually supposed to be just the warm-up jump to the bigger, more challenging Mont Blanc jump. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was supposed to be the stage. It was the practice jump. It was kind of like the testing gear. I had to make a custom backpack to carry my crampons, my skis, all my stuff, because now I'm full on mountaineering, my base jumping stuff. There's not gear made to carry all your stuff, And so, yeah, it was a step when I was really making all this come alive. But it's also, I was adding a ton of pressure on myself, because my ex at the time was pregnant. I was going to be a father. I had all these ambitions. I wanted to be very successful and accomplish my goals in order to then stay home and be super dad for months, and so, but at the same time, I did feel like, I think my relationship at the time was already drifting even before the crash, and I think I felt it, but didn't necessarily express it. And then I had a really close call a couple months before on a ski base jump when I got my parachute wrapped around my skis, and then my canopy snagged on my ski brake, and I opened 50 feet above the ground facing a cliff with a line twist, and I crashed in a pile of rocks and cut my knee almost to the kneecap and bashed my face on some rocks, and so I didn't digest that near-death experience. I had a lot of outside pressures with family and my son about to be born. And I was also adding the worst pressure of all, which is the pressure that you inflict on yourself by making this a mandatory step towards my highest goal of ski base jumping Mont Blanc. And so I think all this influenced my decision making. Also, when I got there, we climbed. The conditions were perfect when we got to the top. But the helicopter that was supposed to film at the time, we weren't really using drones or things like that, and so the helicopter was 2 hours late. So I waited 2 hours on top of the mountain before dropping in, and the weather was starting to change. The birds were starting to fly in a different direction, and you can tell they were catching thermals up. And Stefan, my friend who was going to speed fly behind me, was like, man, it's not looking good. The weather is changing. And I kept a close eye on it, but I think I wanted it so bad. I started to get tunnel vision. I was like, I'm going to get this jump done. I was aware of the conditions, but I didn't take them as seriously as I should have. I could feel the weather changing, but I thought it was still acceptable, which it kind of was, honestly. But when I dropped in, finally the helicopter's in position, I'm going for it, and I'm charging. Well, the wind is picking up, but I can't feel it because I'm skiing. So my relative wind that I'm creating by skiing is kind of offsetting my senses, and I'm not really feeling that crosswind. But everybody is seeing it on the mountain. My friends that are up there, Alex, who's guiding us to the top, and my friend Stefan, they see every time making a turn, snow is being pushed to the side. And I also attempted that jump a few months before. I had to turn around because of the avalanche danger. So the more you try something, the more you want it in a way, And I was there. We were ready. Weather is good. And now the weather is not perfect, but it's manageable. But that wind really picked up when I jumped, and then I paid the price heavily. My parachute opened facing the cliff. I hit the wall 4 times. It broke my femur. I managed to turn around. Passed out under my parachute from the pain. I flew 4,000 feet unconscious, crash landed in the valley, in the forest. It ripped my parachute. I fell another 50 feet onto dirt, broke my femur again. Had a double brain hemorrhage, here and here, and 3 days in a coma, and also 3 weeks before the birth of my kid. Happy ending. I made it home 6 days before his birth. I was, on crutches and cross-eyed for 6 months, but I made it. But that was... It's definitely a jump that forced me to rethink my approach and my methodology of jumping, which I did. I thoroughly went back to ground zero and really rebuilt myself as an athlete and a base jumper to have a solid approach. I had to establish a new frame of execution in order to increase my chances of survival, for sure. I had to thoroughly think about it, and I do talk about it in my TEDx talk, which you've seen, but if people are curious, I really break it down more in this and the lessons that I learned. But there's this, I think some deep psychology is probably influenced some of my judgment at the time too, because everything is connected. We don't necessarily think of it this way, but your body, your heart, and your mind are all connected, even if you don't necessarily make them work harmoniously, So that's what I try to do now. I don't go unless I can reach that state of serenity in the mountains, because then I enjoy it a lot more. And I'm done going for the fight or flight missions, which is probably what you've seen when you were seeing that my videos are different now than they used to be. And I feel like I do things that are a lot more dangerous than they used to be, like the Aiguille Blanche de Peutret we just did last June. There was a super steep run and all that, but I took 11 years to do that run, so I take the time to prepare myself to do things well. I want to be able to be that 80-year-old guy that everybody is like, how the hell did this guy survive all this stuff, and be able to mentor, my son or other kids or other people into this and be there to tell the story and share the lessons learned too, you know. So that's why it's cool to be able to chat about it with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's such an incredible story, and I know that you even made a feature-length documentary about it that was in the Santa Barbara Film Festival, and that was made by with you and a filmmaker from Spokane, Washington named Chase Ogden. And now it's on Amazon Prime and Nat Geo. Can you tell us more about this documentary and how you guys got this project started and completed?
Yeah, so Chase and I started filming. I met him. He was working for the ABC News channel in Spokane, Washington at the time, and I was briefly living in Spokane. So after the Mount Hood jump, I did a interview there, and Chase had a show called Outdoor Storytellers, and he was like, "Hey man, why don't you do a couple episodes with us?" So I did a couple episodes with him too, and then he was like, "Hey man, why don't we make a documentary on you?" I'm like, "Oh, sick! That sounds good," you know. So this idea of the documentary came up, and we talked to Shane about it. And originally the idea was Shane was going to pitch it to Red Bull to try to get funding from Red Bull, and so we'd have a documentary where it was Shane as kind of like the father of the discipline, and me as like the unknown kid coming out of nowhere and charging as a ski base jumper. And so that was the idea of the documentary, and we started to build the script around this and all that. It was supposed to be called That Beautiful Moment. That was the name of the documentary. And then a year later, Shane died. First of all, I'm crushed. You know, my hero's dead, you know, my mentor, my inspiration, like, you know, Shane embodied so many things to so many people, and especially I think for me being a ski base jumper, you know. So then the idea of the documentary just kind of died with Shane in many ways, you know. And we're like, oh well, that was a good idea, but whatever. And then I moved to Utah and started jumping a ton more with Jesse and all these guys over there, and getting a lot of ski base jumps in. And it was just before the avalanche, and then I called Chase and I'm like, Chase, we should finish that documentary and just do it on our own. He was like, that sounds good. And then he came to Utah, we filmed. Then I got the avalanche, and then I got the Matterhorn. He's like, oh my God, we're getting some nerdy stuff. And I was like, yeah, dude, let's do this. But then, you know, then at the time I had met my ex, and then I'd gotten married, and then she's pregnant. And so life is taking a different turn. And then I had my crash. And we're like, oh God, you know, and we had it all on film. So we're like, well, that's the story now, you know. And it took me a year to ski base jump after my crash again. And I went back to Mount Hood, and we had a rough cut of the movie with coming back to ski base jumping through the Mount Hood jump, but it was just not enough, you know. So you can't force a documentary. You have to let life happen to be able to have the story come full circle. So we had to wait for things to come full circle.
Talking about things coming full circle, did you ever end up redoing that jump that you had your big accident on? That was the warm-up for Mont Blanc, or was it just not worth going back and redoing?
I actually had given up. You know, I had the crash on the Pointe d'Areux, you know, and that, but I had given up on going back. I was like, yeah, it's not a perfect mount for a ski base jump. I'll let it be. But then I started thinking about going back, you know. In the documentary, in the hospital, I'm like, you know, 2 days after the crash, I'm like, I'm going to go back and do it, you know, right away. I was like, but then as I recovered and started thinking about it, I actually kind of gave up on the idea for a few years. And then the idea came back up when I started thinking about how to do it in a slightly different way, to have a perfect execution and all that, and redigested the things that went wrong, or the approach that I had that wasn't good, you know, when I crashed. And then I went back to the house, and I did that jump without telling anybody. I went there with 3 close friends, filmed it, and then I called Chase, and I was like, hey, Chase, I just ski base jump Pointe d'Areux again, and I'm sending you all the footage. That's the end of our movie. And he was like, oh my God, that's sick. Yeah, it's cool. So we made the whole movie, and then 3 months later, the weather magically lined up for a ski base jump on top of Mont Blanc. So then I went back to the Alps and I ski base jump from the top of Mont Blanc. So the milestone of going through Pointe d'Areux to be able to go do Mont Blanc actually materialized itself. And we got Mont Blanc done flawlessly, which ended up being in the credits of the movie and was the perfect second ending of the movie. And so that movie pretty much traces these 10 years of those formative years as a ski base jumper, and really the digestion of the crash and becoming a father, most importantly, and still being able to do this while being a father. I love my son and I want to be there to help him grow up to be a man, but at the same time, I do not want to forget myself as an individual. It's the famous quote from Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, who says the greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. And so for me, it was very clear that I needed to survive, of course, or I was going to undertake, but I needed to reach my goals as an individual to truly be the father that I aspired to be. I had to lead by example. If I lived a half life, that's a terrible example to show my son, because he will not be fulfilled as an individual. He will live a mediocre and frustrating life. And so now pursuing and what I'm trying to achieve as an individual actually took even more importance than before. Before it was pure self-satisfaction. Now it's an allegory for living by your ethos and your codes, to try to pass them on. And and so I think that's what's portrayed in that movie. It's not the end all be all, but it's 10 years of those formative years as a professional ski base jumper. And then a couple years after, we just made a short documentary called Adrenaline Sucks. That is a 12-minute short movie that really kind of summarizes the why and how I do this, and looking back with more maturity.
Do you have any big jumps you're planning to do next, or exciting missions that we should be on the lookout for? Like, what does the future for Super Frenchie hold?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of projects. I have my list above my computer. That's why I'm looking at it. And I'd say 90% of my projects or ideas that I have or involve ski alpinism with ski base jumping. I can't call myself an extreme alpinist because I don't really do like gnarly ice climbing and stuff like that, but I do have to travel in a high alpine environment with tools of alpinism, crampons, ice axes, roped in, faces where if you slip, you're dead, kind of thing. So where every turn counts. Yeah, that's the direction I'm going, and it might take me another 10, 15 years to reach my goals, but I have no desire to quit yet,
How old are you now, and does that affect your decision making at all? Is getting older affecting the way you look at the sport and the goals you set for yourself?
I'm 40 years old now, I really feel like I'm getting to the best part of my career. I'm physically more fit, I think, than I've ever been, but also have more experience than I ever had. And I also still have that desire to go and send it. So it's a great equilibrium of being pragmatic, but skilled, and so I'm in a good spot right now where I want to leverage this for another really solid 10 years, It's I see it a lot with my mountain friends that are older than me, that are in their mid-50s, and I can't even keep up with them in the mountains, and they're so solid. Look at Glenn Blake, mid-50s, and he's still skiing gnarly stuff, and it's such a great spot to be in. It's another quote from Carl Jung. Hold on, I have it right here. I saved it on my phone the other day because I thought it was so true. It made me reflect on my journey, and it says, life really does begin at 40. Until then, you're just doing research. So I feel like, I've just been doing my research very intensely and actively. And now I can really, really let my craft bloom. So I'm really, really excited. A lot of good stuff coming up.
That's really cool. What advice would you give to other people who are seeking to live a fulfilling and happy life? It seems like you've really worked hard on pursuing your passion at all costs. So what advice would you give to other people who are hoping to do, they don't have to be a ski base jumper, but, they're seeking fulfillment, they're seeking happiness in life. What advice would you give to others?
Everybody seeks happiness and this and that, but, happiness is a fleeting emotion, just like sadness. It never lasts. Find the thing that makes you want to wake up in the morning, and that puts you on the life mission, and that gives you that fire in your heart. And if you can feel that fire for the rest of your life, that is beautiful. That's how you will experience resonance. The world will resonate within you, and hopefully you can resonate within others and pass that on. And I truly believe that it's invisible wave of positivity.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me, Matthias, and sharing these amazing stories and information with everyone else. I would love to do some more base jumps with you in the future. You were a huge part of me getting into, not only base jumping, but skydiving and paragliding. You were a mentor and an instructor to me. I know we didn't really talk about that in this podcast at all, but I would love to get out there and keep jumping and jumping with you. And so hopefully we'll have more chats about this in the future. There's so much to talk about in terms of air sports and skiing and mountaineering and pursuing your passion. I had a lot of fun with this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, we got to go base jump together. It's been a while. We haven't done that in a while. So let's go base jumping. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to, I like this format. I like what you're working on, and I'd love to do more of these videos and, hopefully give more information and help people realize their ambitious goals and dreams, or if they're jumpers, if they're just simply curious about what we do, share how we do stuff that will hopefully help others do what they do better and reach fulfillment doing what they're doing as well, and it's a very enjoyable conversation. Thank you for making that happen.
Yeah, of course. And before we finally leave, if someone did want to get in contact with you who was curious about, base jumping or ski base jumping, or, had questions for you, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
The best way is send me a message on Instagram, Super Frenchie Official. Send me a message there, or comment if you have maybe an idea of a video you want to see, or something that we could talk about that you're curious about. It's always helpful to have people reach out and be curious, because it makes us reflect on what we're doing and how to do it even better, and also how to pass it on. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Well, cheers. This was great, Matthias. Thank you so much.
All right. Sounds good. See you guys. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for watching The Edge Report. My name is Wes. I'm an adventure filmmaker. And yeah, I'm going to be making more of this stuff. So subscribe and like if you're into this. See you later.